I used to think being adopted by a rich family was the biggest blessing life could offer someone like me, someone who had nothing, no one. When they picked me from the orphanage, smiling in their designer clothes, I thought my prayers had finally been answered. But the moment those massive iron gates closed behind us, something shifted. The air felt heavier. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. And then, the mother looked at me with that chilling smile and said, "Just remember, once you're inside this house, there's no leaving." At first, I thought it was just her way of saying welcome to the family. But as days turned into weeks, I started noticing things, strange things. No one was allowed to go outside. The other kids never talked about their pasts or the ones who mysteriously disappeared. And that's when I realized I hadn't been saved. I had been chosen for something much darker, and my life was about to change forever. I didn't grow up with bedtime stories or birthday parties. There were no family dinners or warm hugs waiting for me at the end of a long day. Just cold floors, shared blankets, and the quiet ache of being forgotten. Life in the orphanage was survival. The kind where you learn quickly not to expect much, because disappointment became a daily routine. Most of the staff were tired, underpaid, and emotionally checked out. We weren't bad kids, we just stopped believing that someone out there would actually choose us, especially someone rich. I used to watch families visit, hoping they'd look at me just once. But I wasn't the cute, smiley kid with dimples. I was the quiet one in the corner, always reading old books, always asking too many questions. The day the Morgan family walked in, everything shifted. They were immaculate designer coats, expensive cologne, the kind of presence that made the whole room fall silent. The staff stood straighter, suddenly, attentive, like we were being evaluated for something far more important than love. They didn't ask about my hobbies or favorite color. They asked strange things, my grades, my memory, even my health history. Then, without much explanation, they pointed to me. "She's the one." Just like that. No tears, no hugs, just a signature on a form and a nod. I was going home. But part of me felt like I wasn't being adopted. I was being selected, like a product. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. After all, I had a real bed now, a room of my own, people who said they wanted me. For the first time in my life, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had finally found where I belonged. But I had no idea what I was walking into. The car ride to their estate felt like a dream. Smooth leather seats, tinted windows, soft music playing, nothing like the rusty vans from the orphanage. I remember pressing my forehead to the glass, watching as the city faded into quiet. Empty roads lined with trees that looked like they'd been trimmed by artists. Then, like something out of a fairy tale, we turned a corner and there it was. The mansion, tall, silent, and intimidating. It wasn't just big, it was unreal. White stone walls, ivy-covered pillars, a fountain bigger than the orphanage's entire courtyard. I didn't even know houses could be that massive. Inside, everything sparkled. Marble floors so clean they reflected your face. Paintings in gold frames, chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks, hallways that went on forever. I stood there, frozen in my dusty sneakers, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe wrong. The butler, yes, they had a real butler, offered to take my bag. But it felt strange handing over everything I owned in one small backpack. They showed me to my room. It had its own bathroom, its own fireplace. Even a walk-in closet, though it was empty at the time. The bed looked like it belonged in a movie. I sat on the edge, still not convinced this wasn't some kind of elaborate prank. The Morgans were gracious, always smiling, always calm. They had rules, of course, strict schedules. No going outside without permission, no contact with anyone from before. I assumed it was just how rich people operated. Structured, private. There were other kids, too quiet, well-dressed, polite. They greeted me kindly, but there was something behind their eyes, like they wanted to say something, but couldn't. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just nervous, that this was the beginning of a better life. But deep down, I felt it. Something wasn't right, and soon, the shine of luxury would start to crack. At first, I blamed it on nerves. New place, new people. It made sense that I felt unsettled. But little things started standing out. Things that didn't add up. Like how everyone woke up at the exact same time. Every morning, without fail. Not just early but synchronized. The lights would flicker on. Soft music would play from hidden speakers, and all the kids would rise like clockwork. No one ever overslept. No one dared. Breakfast was always served by staff in white uniforms. The same meals, the same routines. Every word at the table felt rehearsed. The conversations were polite but hollow. I tried cracking jokes, asking questions about school or hobbies. No one responded with more than a smile or a glance at the adults nearby. And then there were the windows, huge, floor-to-ceiling glass panels that let in streams of golden sunlight, yet none of them opened. Not a single one. Even the doors to the outside were locked from the inside. When I asked about it, the father simply said, "For your safety. The world out there is full of danger." But the world inside was beginning to feel far more dangerous. I once saw one of the older kids trying to slip a note under a door late at night. He froze when he saw me and shook his head violently, mouthing, "Don't say anything." The next morning, he was gone. When I asked where he went, the mother smiled and said, "He's been given a special opportunity. You'll understand when you're older." No one mentioned him again. It was like he'd never existed. There were security cameras in every corner, not just in the hallways but in the bedrooms, even in the bathrooms, hidden behind mirrors. I found one by accident when my comb slipped and tapped the glass just hard enough to show the edge of a lens. My stomach dropped. One night, I heard crying. Soft, muffled sobs through the vents. I followed the sound to a locked door at the far end of the west wing. No one was allowed there. When I asked what that area was, the butler quickly said, "Storage, off limits." But why would storage need soundproofing? Why did it echo with pain? Even my schedule was controlled. What I read, what I studied, what I watched. There was no internet, only pre-approved educational programs and carefully selected movies. I started keeping a notebook, documenting everything. Something was wrong with this house, with this family, and I wasn't going to wait until it was too late to find out what. The more I looked, the more I saw, and the more I saw, the more I realized I wasn't just being paranoid. Something was deeply, disturbingly wrong inside that mansion. So I stopped pretending everything was fine. I started paying attention, really paying attention. Every hallway had a pattern. Guards rotated at specific times. Lights dimmed exactly at 9 p.m. Doors locked automatically except one. A narrow service stairwell hidden behind a curtain near the kitchen. I saw one of the maids use it once when she thought no one was watching. That became my entry point. Late at night, I crept out of bed and slipped through that stairwell, counting every creak in the steps. My heart felt like it would explode in my chest. But fear couldn't stop me anymore. I needed answers. That's when I found the basement. It wasn't cold or dusty, like you'd expect. It was sleek, clean, clinical. Almost like a laboratory. Rows of filing cabinets, locked drawers, blinking monitors. I opened one of the drawers and my entire world shifted. Inside were folders, detailed profiles of every kid who had ever lived in that house. IQ tests, DNA samples, psychological evaluations, daily behavior reports. It was like we were part of some long-term experiment. Then I saw my own folder. My picture, my blood type, notes about my behavior, even private things I'd never shared with anyone. Fears, triggers, memories. I felt sick, violated. I kept digging and stumbled onto a password-protected computer. Miraculously, I guessed the password, the mother's birthday, which I'd heard during a dinner toast. And what I found next was worse than anything I had imagined. There were emails between the Morgans and wealthy clients. They weren't just adopting children. They were raising us to sell us. Not like human trafficking in the way the media shows it, but something much more polished and more terrifying. They called it placement. Elite buyers looking for tailored heirs, gifted protégés, or silent successors. That's why everything was so perfect. Why the kids were so disciplined. Why no one ever talked about the ones who vanished. I copied what I could: photos, documents, recordings onto a USB I found in the drawer. But just as I was about to leave, I heard footsteps. Heavy, close, I grabbed the drive, closed the drawer, and ran. That night, I barely slept. I kept one eye on the door and the other on the window, even though I knew it wouldn't open. Now I knew the truth, and that made me dangerous. They wouldn't let me leave, but I was already planning my escape. I thought I was being careful. I thought I was quiet enough, fast enough, smart enough. But the morning after I broke into the basement, everything felt off. The staff didn't smile that day. The other kids avoided my eyes. And at breakfast, the mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Sweetheart," she said with a calm so cold it made my skin crawl, "we need to have a little chat." They took me to her office. The doors shut behind me like the gates of a prison. She poured tea like nothing was wrong, like we were just a people having a polite conversation. Then she slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of me sneaking through the halls, standing in the basement. Touching the drawer, looking at the files. My stomach twisted. I had been watched the whole time. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She just looked me in the eyes and said, "You are very smart. That's why we picked you. But smart children need structure. Without it, they make dangerous choices." I tried to stay calm, tried to lie, to deny it all, but she already knew. She smiled, and then she locked the door. For 2 days, I was confined to my room. No meals, no sunlight, no contact with anyone. The cameras watched me constantly. Every move, every breath. I didn't know if they were planning to reprogram me or make me disappear. But I wasn't alone. One of the other kids, Lena, slipped a note under my door. It said only 5 words: "I know a way out." That night, Lena and I moved. Silent steps, heartbeat in my throat. We disabled the camera in my room with toothpaste on the lens. Used a stolen keycard she'd taken months ago. She had been preparing long before I even got there. We didn't go through the front. We crawled through the old vent system behind the laundry room. It smelled like rust and dust and hope. But halfway through, the alarms sounded. Blinding red lights, shouting voices. Heavy footsteps coming fast. Lena shoved me forward and said, "Go. If one of us makes it, let the world know what they're doing." I didn't want to leave her, but I had no choice. So I ran. Blind, breathless, terrified, straight into the unknown. With the truth clenched tight in my hand. I didn't stop running. Not when my lungs burned. Not when my legs gave out. Not even when my bare feet hit gravel and thorns. Because behind me wasn't just a mansion, it was a machine. One that turned orphans into property. Into perfect little packages for the highest bidder. I made it to a gas station just before sunrise. Dirty, bleeding, shaking. The clerk looked horrified when he saw me. He offered me water and asked what happened. I couldn't speak. All I could do was hand him the USB and whisper, "Please, show someone, anyone." The clerk called the police. The first officer who showed up didn't believe me. He said I was probably just a runaway with a wild imagination. But once he opened the drive, once he saw the files, his expression changed. He called backup. Then silence turned into sirens. The media picked it up within 24 hours. Headlines screamed across every screen. Rich family caught in underground adoption scandal. Children groomed for sale in elite estate. Inside the mansion of secrets, the Morgans were arrested. Not just them, dozens of clients. Across countries and continents, the operation had been running for over 10 years, hidden in plain sight under the name of a philanthropic trust. They'd adopted over 40 children. Only 19 were ever found. I testified in court. So did Lena. She survived. They caught her in the vents. But the public outcry came so fast. They couldn't afford to make her disappear. She stood beside me, holding my hand as we told our story. The truth. People cried. Reporters shouted. But for the first time, the world listened. Donations poured into support centers. Investigations opened in other institutions. Laws were rewritten to tighten adoption protocols. And the mansion, the place where so many of us had been trapped, was turned into a refuge. For real orphans. Safe ones. Free ones. Some nights I still hear the sirens. Still feel the cold grip of fear. But I also hear Lena's voice saying, "Let the world know." And I did. We did. We weren't just survivors. We were the ones who broke the cycle, who burned the system down from the inside. And now No matter where I go or what I do, I carry one truth with me. Even in silence, even in fear, even in the dark, the truth has a way of finding the light. And when it does, it changes everything. They called it a victory. They said we were heroes, survivors. The media painted us as brave, resilient, inspiring. But they never showed what came after. The quiet moments, the nights we couldn't sleep, the way we flinched at sudden noises or avoided our own reflections in glass. Freedom doesn't always feel like freedom right away. Sometimes it feels like emptiness, like you've escaped the cage but forgot how to live beyond it. I was placed with a real family this time, a kind older couple with no children of their own. They didn't ask questions, they didn't press. They gave me space and patience. For the first few weeks, I barely spoke. I kept waiting for the cameras, for the rules, for the voice behind the door telling me when to wake up and what to eat. But it never came. No locked doors. No surveillance. Just quiet. And meals made with love, and hugs I didn't know how to return at first. Then one morning, I found a gift on my bed. A journal. On the first page, they'd written, "You've been through the unthinkable. Now it's time to write your own story." That was the moment. The moment it hit me, I wasn't just someone who survived something terrible. I was someone who could choose what came next. I started writing. First about the mansion, then about the pain, and eventually, about healing. One of my entries became an essay. That essay went viral. Then it became a book. And then, speaking invitations, interviews, schools asking me to come share my story with students who felt voiceless. That was the real turning point. Not the night I escaped, not the courtroom victory, but the day I realized my story didn't end with trauma, it began with truth. And in telling that truth, I found power, not just for me, but for every kid still waiting to be heard. Looking back, it's surreal to think how close I came to becoming another silent name in a hidden file. How a beautiful mansion, polished floors, and kind smiles were just masks hiding something monstrous. And how, despite the fear, despite everything telling me to stay quiet, I chose to speak. I've learned something important since then. Evil doesn't always look like a villain in a movie. Sometimes it dresses in luxury, speaks with charm, and hides behind good intentions. Sometimes it calls itself family. But truth doesn't care how powerful your name is or how much money you have. Truth waits. And when it comes out, it changes everything. I'm not the same scared kid who entered that house. I'm stronger. I'm still healing. But now I know healing is not forgetting it's growing. It's using your pain to protect others. To anyone out there who feels trapped in a world that looks perfect on the outside, but feels wrong on the inside, trust your gut. Ask questions. Keep your eyes open. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're awake. And to those who have suffered in silence, your voice matters, even if it shakes. Even if it takes time. Speak. Because the moment you do, you light a fire that darkness can't survive. And that fire can save more than just you. It can change the world.